You can tell me your name,
My name is Claudia J. Celestine.
and if you could spell it for me, please.
Claudiacelestine.
And that's the hardest question I'm going to ask you.
Good. I knew the answer.
And please, so if you make a mistake, we can stop. It's not a problem, and just change it.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you for coming. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Well, the questions we're going to ask you could be about what it was like growing up, as far back as you can remember as a kid growing up in Donaldsonville. Maybe any stories your parents would have told you, or your grandparents. How far back do you know of your history?
Oh, I guess maybe the middle and late 30s, because I was born in 1928.
Where did your parents come from?
My mother is a native of Donaldsonville, from the area that's called Port Barrow. And my father is originally from a plantation called Belterre. Now, I said the plantation, his mother lived on the plantation, but he wasn't born on the plantation, but in that area. I think it was property owned by the plantation. But his mother lived with, in the early days, from what he told us, his mother lived with a cousin who lived on this property.
And how about your grandparents? Did you know them?
Yes, I knew my father's mother. I knew my mother's mother and father. I don't know where my mother's father was born, but seems like I remember they told us his mother came from Virginia, so maybe he was born in Virginia. But my grandmother was born in a little area down Highway 1 that's in Barton, Louisiana. She's from there.
Did they ever tell you the stories of how it was when they were growing up? You ever hear those stories?
Vaguely, I remember some stories that they told us.
Can you share them?
Yeah. Well, they were not too different from many of the stories, or many of the incidents that occurred when I was growing up. Well, you know, I grew up in a segregated society. Well, most of the, according to my grandparents, most of the black people lived in either on the plantation or in those who had acquired some property of their own, either through purchase or through inheritance. They farmed the land. And they lived a simple life, very simple. They were not able to attend school very long because the boys were needed to go to work to help out with the family expenses. Most times the girls were educated as much as the education that was offered to them. And more than likely it was an elementary school education. But in my day, we were privileged to be able to go all the way through high school and even to college. It was not an everyday thing, however, for black boys and girls to go to college. And we consider ourselves very fortunate to be able to do this. Of course, we had to do it with the help of a lot of people. My two sisters and I were fortunate because we were able to get scholarships, and then we were able to get aid from the university. So, and we worked, of course, part-time while we were at the university, and then during summers.
What type of work?
Well, in the beginning, when we were old enough to work, we worked for white people in their houses. We did household chores, cleaning up, babysitting. when we were older, like maybe in high school, there were a few more jobs available. Some of the girls were able to work in the drugstores, but the stores had not begun to hire blacks very much. Boys were able to work as janitors. They were not used as busboys. Some of them worked in the restaurants to assist cooks. A lot of the boys did yard work, mowing lawns and so forth. And one interesting thing, I think it's interesting, my mother's father was self-employed. He had been able to acquire a bit of land, and he grew vegetables, and but mostly he grew flowers, and he tended several flower gardens for people in the town, and he prided himself on growing dahlias. His biggest business occurred around All Saints. But it was also interesting to us to know that every Saturday he was able to send flowers to our church. The children were sent to bring flowers to the church for the Sunday morning Mass. And then he was able to lease some land. And all of this was done with a horse and a plow. He didn't have any machines, a horse and a plow and hoes and shovels, And he had two sons who were, they left home when they were teenagers because they didn't want to do that kind of work. They just ran away from home. And so my brothers were available. We lived right down the street from my grandfather. And so they were well, I guess you can say, I don't know if they were so willing, but they had to help him. And then sometimes when harvest time came, the girls had to help. Harvesting, really gathering the white potatoes, picking beans, gathering okra, that kind of thing.
Hang on 1 second.
Sure.
So all of your grandparents and all that were all free men when you knew them?
Oh, yes.
So, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about, as you were growing up, if you could give me kind of the day in the life of like, what would you do around your neighborhood when how did you start your day off when you were kids?
Okay, if it were during the school year, we would get up and get ready to go to school. We didn't have morning chores, but we had evening chores. But we would get up and get dressed to go to school. My mother would prepare a simple breakfast, and she always made sure that we had breakfast. We would go to school, and then after school we had duties. We had to help my mother with housework. She taught us how to, not really she, but her mother and one of her sisters taught us how to do needlework. And we did this not only for the household, but sometimes we were able to sell our products to other persons in the neighborhood. We washed dishes. Of course, we were the dishwashers. My mother didn't wash dishes. She cooked and piled up the pots, and we ate and piled up the dishes, and we had to wash them. And the boys, too. The boys had to have their turn, but they did mostly work out in the yard, like keeping the yard clean, mowing the grass. And they didn't have a powered mower. They used these hand mowers, but they did that. And we used wood for fuel. We had a wood stove for cooking. We had fireplace in the house for the heating in the wintertime. And during the summer time, well, even uh, before the summer began, logs used to float down the Mississippi River. We lived near the Mississippi River, and logs would float down. My father would catch these and bring them to shore, and they'd manage to cut them up into wood and bring the wood back to the house and store it in what was called cords. They'd stack the wood up, and it was used for the cooking during the summer and for cooking and heat during the winter in the early days. And
Did y'all have electricity?
not when
Did y'all have electricity?
not in my early years. I don't think so. No, because I remember doing my homework by lamplight. And of course, that's probably why one of the reasons I'm wearing glasses now. In fact, I started wearing glasses when I was 16 years old. And because we had to do our homework by either light from the fireplace in the winter or by lamplight. And I think I was in high school when we got electricity. Yeah, about in high school. Mm-hmm.
So I shouldn't even ask about indoor plumbing.
Oh no, and of course air conditioning and even an oscillating fan was out of the picture because we had no electricity. But you know, I realized that it was not as hot in the summers, the spring and summers, as it is now. Because now a person cannot survive without some type of fan or air conditioning, whatever, some cooling system. They can't survive. You hear of people having heat strokes, you know, and we didn't, I don't remember hearing about that when we were growing up and we had no electricity.
Tell me about the plumbing and stuff, because a lot of people don't even really know that, especially younger kids.
The outdoor toilets, that was really an operation to build it and to maintain it because, first a hole was dug. I don't know the depth of the hole, but anyway, it was dug, and over this hole was placed the construction that someone had made. Most likely it was the father of the household or some adult male, and it was made of wood, and usually it had the same kind of covering that the house had. If the house had a tin roof, it had a tin roof too. It was weatherproof, and it was large enough to accommodate. I'm going to tell you something that I think was interesting about the outdoor toilet that my grandfather had at his house. In fact, they used to call it the Little White House because the big house, the house he lived in, was white, trimmed with green shutters, and the outdoor toilet was also white house, trimmed with green shutters. But it had, most outdoor toilets had the seat to accommodate an adult. And it was difficult for a child because it was elevated. My grandfather had, there were two seats for adults, and over in a corner there was one for children. You know, it was not so high off the floor. And it was, like I said, it had shuttered windows and, of course, a door. And because of the size of a family, a toilet, an outdoor toilet had to be moved because, of course, it was filled with the refuse from the humans, and it was moved to another part of the yard, and another hole was dug. And when they moved it, they spread lime around it and covered it over with the dirt that was dug from the new hole. And every home in the neighborhood had an outdoor toilet. We wonder why people were able to survive, and that was very unsanitary, but it was the way of life at that time. And the same thing was true about our drinking water. We had a cistern, and almost every yard had a cistern, and the water source was the rain. it fell on the house, and most of the houses were tin roofs, and they had the gutters all around the house. The water drained from the roof into the gutters, and it was channeled into a cistern. And this was the water we used for everything, for drinking, for cooking, for bathing. And I don't remember in the early days that the water was boiled for drinking. I don't remember. I think it just as it came out of that tap from that cistern, I think it was drunk that way. And then today I wonder why there weren't any more deaths resulting, from drinking this water. But I guess it was the good Lord that kept the people alive. And of course, in the summertime, mosquitoes laid their eggs in the water in the cistern. And frequently when you'd open the tap and draw the water, the larva from the mosquito came out. And all you had to do was just get them out of there and use the water. And it seems to be very hilarious now, but it was a necessity then. It was a way of life. And it was all we could do, all we had, and so we made the best of it.
There's a lot of people like that.
Sure.
My grandmother had cistern water.
Sure.
When you got a little bit older, did y'all go? Was there a movie theater? Or,
Oh, yes.
Tell me what kind of entertainment?
Oh, when we were very small, there was a movie theater, the Grand Theater on Railroad Avenue in Donaldsonville. Of course, it was segregated. Whites sat on the bottom level, the main level of the theater, and blacks sat in the balcony. And it was a smaller area, but you didn't have as many blacks going to the movies as you had whites. And later on, when I was in high school, the Harlem Theater was built for blacks. It's no longer in use, but it was the theater that was built for blacks.
Is that the True Friends Hall, the same building?
No, it was on the corner. I think there's a furniture store there now, a used buy-to-rent furniture store. I don't know the name of it, but it was on the corner on the same side of the street, but on the corner of the True Friends Hall. True Friends Hall is always, as far as I know, it's always been there as the True Friends Hall.
I'm going to ask you about that a little bit later, but I want to finish on entertainment. Tell me about dances. Did y'all go to dances?
Okay. Well, there were school dances, and well chaperoned at all times. And then there were public dances at the True Friends Hall, well chaperoned. And the unique thing about this was that adults and children went to the same dances, teenage children, and but adults were not permitted to dance with children, youngsters. Youngsters dance with youngsters, and older persons dance with adults dance with adults. And we had a few bands around. There was a family, Leonard Julian family. I don't know if you heard about the Julians. All right, they had a band that used to play for the dances. There was Ernest Himes from Assumption Parish. And then, I don't know the name of this group, but there were several local men who played with the band. Mr. Homer Richard, Mr. Tony Hudson, Mr. Ernest Clavery, Mr. Clavery's brother, I think, I don't remember his name, but several musicians from the area played in this band. And they played for the school dances and for the public dances.
Did you know Mr. Claiborne Williams?
Oh, yes. Yes, I knew Mr. Williams. He was my sister's music teacher, piano teacher. I was not fortunate enough to be taught the piano by him because my parents couldn't afford to have two children taking lessons, but my sister, who's about a year and a half older than I am, took lessons from Mr. Williams.
Do you have any stories about him that you can tell?
Well, I remember going with my sister to her lessons, and I know he didn't want anyone other than he and the student in the room at the same time. So, and the reason I was alone with my sister, because my mother didn't let us walk in the street alone. We always had to go with someone else. And we walked from our side of the town, which is Port Barrow, across the footbridge. And that footbridge brings back pleasant memories. We crossed that footbridge to go to Mr. Williams's house. And from what I heard while I was waiting in the hallway for my sister, he was very strict, very stern. And sometimes I think I heard him, and I guess it must have been the knuckles that he tapped my sister on. Also, he taught violin lessons. My sister had a friend who was the daughter of Dr. Laurie. I'm sure you must have heard of Dr. Laurie. Well, he and my sister were in the same class in high school, and they were good friends. So sometimes my sister's lesson was scheduled the same day she had a violin lesson. But of course, her father brought her in a car, or he had his chauffeur to bring her in the car, and we walked. But anyway, he wouldn't let the two of them sit in the room at the same time. And I understand he was a very good music teacher. Of course, his band played. Claiborne Williams' band was one of the bands. I think his band and the Julian's band were the ones who played at most of the dances that I attended. And we had some out-of-town artists who appeared here for dances. Fats Domino, Joe Tex, and there was a family of musicians. They didn't have a band, but I think the younger persons in the family formed a group. I think they even called them the Brothers Johnsons. Their last name was Johnson, and they were. Have you heard of Ples Johnson? Okay, Ples was one of them. He and his brother, the sister sang with the group, and my younger brother was kind of looking at the girl to be a girlfriend, but the brothers wouldn't have that. But anyway, they played several times, but they were living in New Orleans, I think, at the time, and they'd come out on weekends to play and they were popular with the teenagers because they were young themselves.
You said there were some real fond memories about the footbridge.
Oh, yeah. My mother told us, now I don't know if this happened in her lifetime, but at one time the footbridge was I guess you call it a drawbridge. It opened up because the Bayou Lafourche was connected to the Mississippi River, and boats came through there and went all the way down Bayou Lafourche to the Gulf of Mexico. And there was a story, and I don't know if this happened in my mother's lifetime or if she heard about it, but there was a young lady who got trapped on the bridge and was killed. When a boat was going to come through, I think there was a signal, a whistle, or something, and no one was supposed to get on the bridge. And as the bridge was turning, she ran to get. There was I believe it called a turnstile, at the head of the bridge, and she ran and got on the bridge, and some kind of way she was trapped into that.